Well, thanks for coming on, David. You are a real support for the smoking section with Steve and Helfer.
Good to be here, Steve. Yeah.
Thank you. Just see. Well, I'm not going to be able to get that. I'm going to try to revitalize the show in the near future. I would like to get a new poster, and let's see, what else can I do? Get some good guests and whatnot. That's always a difficult thing. But you're a good guest. You always seem to.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, it's been a few weeks, but we were going over some topics to cover, and we've got a few, don't we?
Well, one question I have is, should we stick to tobacco issues only? What is your opinion? I mean, that's to some degree that's limiting, but at the same point, that doesn't get us. People don't like all of a sudden take offense at something we say about something else.
Oh yeah. You mean if we got more into topical issues and things?
Other topical issues. I mean, tobacco is a topical issue.
It draws out our opinions on other things. You mean?
Right, and then it could lead to people saying, "Well, I really kind of liked some of the things that CCSR has done, but I didn't realize some of the members were, whatever issue it could be."
Right.
Let's just say, for example, it had to do with Israel, and somebody would take great offense if you said something pro or con Israel on the show, you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden they
might start watching.
Well, they might stop watching, and they might also not support us, because I know people who are extreme conservatives, and I know people who are extreme liberals who sympathize with our point of view, but if I said something that struck one of them as the wrong thing, they might withdraw their support from Cambridge Citizens for Smokers' Rights.
Right. Well, unless there's a way to talk about these things where you can keep a little bit of impartiality too, right? Or
yes. One could do that, but that's
it's difficult.
That's even being. You think you're good at it?
Although I know you don't think that I am.
Are you really?
Because you often think that I get too overheated.
Well, it seems to me you can get agitated pretty quickly, right?
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm trying to work on that.
Oh, is that right? Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, for example,
we were talking about healthcare, I think, the other day at Andala, at our meeting, and I suddenly noticed I was getting a little bit.
Did you?
Heated up? I don't know why. We were talking about Obamacare, I think, and
right,
and some of the things that I had heard about it, pros and cons.
Well, I mean, most of these issues that people discuss and get upset about are usually kind of, I don't know. I think most of these issues are pretty complex, and I think on most sides of most issues, there are pretty good arguments one might have for either of them.
Well, yeah, I mean, the problem in our world today is that people want to paint the other side as completely wrong, I think, and that's a problem when you start thinking that your adversaries have nothing good to say.
Yeah.
And it's easy to vilify them, and then you start feeling really, hostile and negative, and but to convince. You have to look at the issue and convince yourself that maybe that there are some opposite opinions, that
yes.
you haven't been willing to concede, right?
Perhaps.
I mean, even as I hear you say that, well, every issue is complex. I know that I know that I can tend to think, well, no, there are certain issues that are black and white, obviously,
Right.
I'm just hearing myself thinking that, and you reminded me that I've got to look more closely sometimes. It's so easy to say that something is black and white.
Yes. Of course, I think to some degree, well, the tobacco issue, I think to some degree is almost black and white. For me it is anyway.
Right.
But of course, then that puts me in a minority because most people think it's black and white, and the tobacco companies are evil, and tobacco's no good for you, and the world would be a better place
You mean
if we didn't smoke. And so
In spite of your theory that every issue is complex, you're saying that you don't look at this one that way.
Pretty much not. But the only thing is, even with the tobacco issue, I don't take, I don't get overly personal about, let's say anti-smoking advocates. That they don't, it's one thing about anti-smoking advocates that is really unbelievable to me is, in a way, is like, this guy named Winikoff, who is like, just says the most terrible things about smokers, and really vile. He's a pediatrician at Massachusetts General Hospital, and he says that he's a big promoter, although really I haven't heard from him in a while. He's a big promoter of the third-hand smoke theory. So that is, for example, if
Passive smoke?
No, it's not passive smoke. No, passive smoke is secondhand smoke.
Secondhand.
Well, I guess it's a form of passive smoke. But I mean,
third hand?
Yeah, you're not familiar with third-hand smoke?
No, explain that to me.
Third-hand smoke is, for example, let's say I have a cigarette while I'm waiting for a bus. And then I get on the bus. There is some of that cigarette smoke will be clinging to my clothes, the residue, or I think they call it particulates. Smoke is composed of particulates.
Right.
And I will be off-gassing it. That's called off-gassing. So like someone might smell my clothing, or they may not even be able to smell it, but these particulates are flying off me, and that's harming other people.
People have made an issue of this. Huh?
Yes.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that seems stretch to me.
Well, I mean, it is a stretch, but then again, if you are an anti-smoking advocate and you want to do everything you can to make the world no tobacco place. I mean, you use these. This is a weapon. This is a this is a weapon. Does it have any kind of scientific foundation? No, but
right.
I mean, does he believe it? Does Winikoff believe it? I don't know. That's hard to say. It's hard for me to believe that someone with a medical background could believe that, but. People with medical backgrounds believe all kinds of things.
But you're saying that you don't get personally worked up about people who are zealots, anti-smoking zealots.
I try not to.
That's good.
But I don't. I mean, because like for example, one thing is I think very often many of the anti-smoking zealots I've met have a certain not all of them, but they have a begrudging respect for anyone who is a smoking rights advocate, because a smoking rights advocate, particularly smoking rights advocates who are familiar with the issues.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like when I used to go to the hearings, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just think you can fight honorably, and Winikoff, I was in a green room, I think, with Winikoff. And he, put out his hand to shake my hand. I couldn't believe it, and I didn't really know if I wanted to shake his hand, but I did.
Oh, you did.
Mm-hmm.
That's good.
And then there was this other guy who was associated with Winikoff. He's part of this group that is doing everything they can to raise the age of smoking to 21 in Massachusetts. And I mean, he got up and said some things, and then I got and testified. And I mean, I said everything the opposite of what he said. And I tried my damnedest to undermine everything he said. And I mean, then after the meeting, he came up and, was very friendly with me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, one of the things is I do think that the anti-smoking advocates say things that are very untruthful, many of them.
Well, Yeah, but the problem there is that, you know, they're so influenced by what they see as the science of it all, right?
Oh, no. I mean, they distort the science terribly. They have to know they're doing that.
You think they know that?
Oh, they've got to. I mean,
Really?
oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, it's just, I mean, obviously, I mean, like, for example, third-hand smoke. Well, I mean, let's say, for example, you know, the first rule of toxicology. Do you know who the father of toxicology is?
No.
Do you know who the father of modern medicine is?
Louis Pasteur?
No. William Osler.
Oh, okay. Pasteur is, no, he's more of a chemist, I think. Yeah. That was. Okay.
Do you know who the father of country music is?
Jimmy Rogers.
That's right. Very good.
Okay,
the father of toxicology is Paracelsus.
Oh, that's going way back.
Mm,
Is that
Europe.
Is that
Europe?
That sounds like
He's a
ancient
European.
Greece or something.
I don't think that was his real name. You know, I think those guys kind of took. And the first rule. He's the father of toxicology, and the first rule of toxicology is that there is really no such thing as a toxin. Nothing is toxic in its small enough dose.
In nature?
There's no such. The only thing that is a toxin, the dose makes the poison. So there is no known substance or chemical that is not harmless in a small enough dose.
Mm. Even something like this, like microbes or like nerve gas, these kind of things that people.
Yeah, even nerve gas. Well, I mean, like chlorine is in our water, and it was a gas used to kill people, I think, in the First World War.
Hmm. Hmm.
I mean, arsenic is in the water. I think it naturally occurs in the water. Strychnine, all of these things in a small enough dose is harmless. And something is necessary to life as water in a large enough dose is poisonous.
So thus confirming your theory that particulates smoke is not toxic.
Well, in a small enough dose.
Yeah. Well,
And the anti-smokers, in many ways, claim that there is no safe limit, for exposure to secondhand smoke. But I mean, there's got to be a safe. But of course, I mean, it's just playing with, it's misinformed. They know because it's a small enough dose of anything, yet they say that any exposure to secondhand smoke is harmful. That counters the fundamental law of toxicology.
Well, it's always easier to get angry with somebody who you know is distorting the facts rather than somebody who honestly believes what they're saying,
Yeah, right, yeah. But I don't know but there was a point to this. That's Paracelsus, he's the father of toxicology. So that, I mean, being exposed to these micro amounts of particulate matter and so forth from secondhand smoke is just counter to toxicology. And I mean, there's a man named Simon Chapman who is from Britain, and he's violently anti-smoking as you can possibly get. He's one of the world's foremost anti-smoking. But even he will take issue with the people, with the third-hand smoke people, and has written some very interesting stuff about it.
Well, there seems to be like two issues with anti-smokers. I mean, there's people who I think try to base their animosity on just on the medical aspects and the science, and then there are people who take more of a visceral reaction to it, like, oh, it's just, that's just disgusting or something.
Well,
you know?
yeah, there's that ilk, yeah.
You know, I mean, which is not, that's a considerable number.
Oh, yeah, certainly.
Especially since people have gotten more conditioned, like you've told me before that in the last 50 years, right, there's been a slow conditioning
Yes.
of people to be more sensitive.
Hypersensitization. Hypersensitization.
Right.
I mean, you can take people, I think psychology has proved this, that you can take people and if you subject them to enough conditioning, I mean, you can make them terribly, terribly sensitive to, I think, pollen or salty food or the slight odor of whatever,
You mean just psychologically?
Well, I mean, you can do it.
I mean, not even exposing them to the substances themselves, right?
I think you can do it through several ways, but one of them is psychologically. And people can, there used to be, I mean, sometimes people who are particularly phobic about something, psychologists will take them and expose them to it in very small doses and then increase it, and that's sometimes worse. Well, you do the opposite, and that's what's been done with smoking, and it's been conditioned. It's they've done it over a period of about 50 years. The real question that always comes right down to, then someone comes and, well, why would people do this? What could be their motive? And that's something that's very hard to answer, because obviously you can't answer, you don't know what people's motives are.
Well, I have read some of the anti-smoking blogs that are out there, from people who are connected with the movement. I mean,
Yes.
I'm sorry, pro-smoking
Right.
blogs, and some of the attitude seems to me that it's, they use words like Orwellian and
Right.
and in the sense that it's really kind of more of a thought control,
Well, I mean,
it's like it's just all about people having power over others, which.
Well, I mean, I think there's something unique about tobacco, I think, as a phenomenon. For some reason, tobacco is almost like, it's just such a special thing. It almost can't be compared to anything else.
Alcohol, maybe.
It can't be compared to alcohol, not really. Well, I guess it
Of course,
can be a
but
little bit.
when we did go through a period where, prohibition. I mean,
Yeah.
alcohol was banned, but I mean that seemed to be really, out of date now. That attitude. But,
Yes.
But in a way, the smoking, we're having a prohibition
Similar,
now.
yeah, it's similar. But we've gone through this in periods of anti-tobaccoism all through.
Well, why are you differentiating tobacco from alcohol?
I think. I think it's very well. I mean, alcohol is much less natural. Tobacco is something that is very, is a plant, an herb that is not something that requires a great deal of distillation or fermentation. I mean, it does require processing, and alcohol, tobacco. I think it enjoys. I mean, I think the American Indian was right in many ways. I think it's something that's to be revered. I mean, I think I think alcohol is a very nice thing too, but I don't think it's something to be revered.
Oh, you mean like it's got a mystique about it? You mean?
Well, you mean what, tobacco?
Yeah.
Well, mystique implies that it's kind of something that's kind of false, whereas I think tobacco.
We use the word revere. That's a pretty.
Well, the American
that's a
Indian
pretty-
revered
that's a
tobacco,
strong word.
and the American Indian looked at tobacco completely different than he looked at every other plant. They use tobacco was the most sacred of all plants.
Yeah, but I mean, other native cultures, they have peyote or
Peyote,
psilocybin, right, or what I don't know.
Yeah, but the American Indian didn't use those very much. That's for sure. And but I don't know.
So you're saying it's something that really comes out of the land and has been regarded as sort of having
Well, it's very special. Like I know a lot of people in the pro-smoking movement or the smokers' rights movement like to say, oh well, what's next? Are they going to go after sweet food, or sugary food, or fatty food? Are they going to go after alcohol? Are they going to go after
right.
sedentary lifestyles?
Well, that's that totalitarian.
Well, it's also the slippery slope argument. And I even use the argument myself from time to time, but I've been involved in tobacco rights for 20 years, and none of that's occurred. I mean, they have not gone after obese people. Nothing comparable to tobacco. They have not gone after.
Yeah, well, the mayor of New York tried to cut down on.
Right. I mean, yeah, but this is not. I mean,
yeah.
yes. So right. Yes. Right. I mean, there is some movement along those lines. There's no question about it. But nothing like tobacco, and it just hasn't happened in 20 years. People say, oh, they're going to go after you next, you obese people. Well, I've been around in smokers' rights for 20 years, and if they were going to do it, they would have done it by now.
Yeah.
I mean, there is some, but I mean, it's interesting because Jane Brody in the New York Times on Tuesday, she writes the New York Times health column every Tuesday in the science section, and she has always been, a pretty much of an anti-smoker, very much as a matter of fact.
Jane Brody?
Jane Brody is I guess you might call her the health editor of the New York Times. Maybe not the health editor, but she has been writing a health column for the New York Times for probably 30 years.
Okay, I've heard of her, yeah.
Right. And this Tuesday's health column, she talked about the stigma of being fat. And she said it's kind of like the last thing that you can stigmatize people for. And she was talking about, I didn't read the column, but it was, it was interesting to me because, she's never defended smokers. In fact, she's done everything she can to stigmatize smokers.
Mm-hmm.
Yet she's now saying, well, being fat is the last kind of stigma, and it's something, we shouldn't be doing. But, like fat shaming as opposed, but tobacco shaming, she's all for.
Right. Well,
and then she'll go on to say it's frightfully addictive, but I mean, if it's so addictive and we can't help ourselves, why should we be shamed? So tobacco is unique, I think.
well, yeah, which makes the that feeling of disgust toward it, more difficult to understand, maybe.
To understand from our viewpoint, or what?
Yeah, well, in other words, if it's got these sort of special qualities, like you're saying, that for people to say, well, it's such a disgusting, horrible thing, it's a little bit of a sort of a contradiction there, maybe,
Well, I mean,
they're missing something. Maybe they're missing.
I think secondhand smoke is like if you see The Exorcist, in these movies where like if you throw holy water on people.
Mm-hmm.
I think I think if some people are exposed to secondhand smoke, it's like throwing holy water on someone who's possessed.
Right, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
Well, it's because they are possessed, as a matter of fact. They have been possessed by anti-smoking zealots who have subjected to them to merciless conditioning and programming and, brainwashing. Well, there was interesting, that movie, Wind River. You saw a very violent movie.
It's playing at the Kendall. Yeah.
Right, very violent movie.
Yeah, did you think the violence was a little bit gratuitous, some of it? That's what my friends thought. A little bit over the top, maybe?
Maybe. I don't know. It's pretty well done, man.
Yeah.
The violence was amazing. I mean, it just seemed so real.
Yeah. But the landscape was really stark, wasn't it? I mean, and the whole...
Wyoming.
Yeah, the sense of solitude and quiet, and with
it's very, very interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't understand some of it, but one thing I liked about it, which I thought, from a smoker's rights point of view, is one cigarette was smoked in the entire movie.
Oh, I'm trying to remember.
And it was very prominent. And it was also smoked by a very good character.
The hunter?
No.
Or the father of the girl
Who was the victim of the rape? Yes.
The Native American
and
father.
at one point in the movie, he goes out and he pulls out a lighter, and I go, oh my gosh, he's going to smoke a cigarette, and he takes some big drags off the cigarette, because he was so. broken up over, he was so distraught over his daughter's death. But that's really interesting, that a cigarette would play that prominently in a movie, and the director certainly I'm curious, was that an act of defiance on the part of the director to the anti-smoking group's efforts to censor movies?
Oh, I don't know. Is it gotten that bad? I mean, it depends on the movie. So sometimes they like I think I told you recently that movie about Jackie Kennedy had her smoking.
Well, I mean, but
a lot,
that's interesting too, and I'm curious what. I mean, I don't think Hollywood directors, for the most part, like to be told what they can and cannot have in their movies.
Well, I think if it adds to the period atmosphere, like in that TV show Mad Men. I mean, you
Right.
know, everybody. I mean, that was 1960s.
Right. If it's a
New York.
period piece, that's one thing. But if it's not a period piece, but Jacqueline Kennedy, I mean, I respect Hollywood. You know, they depicted Jacqueline Kennedy smoking. In the movie about Barack Obama, I think he smoked.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see it, but he smoked, and so but there's efforts to limit or to excise entirely smoking from movies, and I respect. And this director had one person smoking, and it was a good person, and it was a very prominent scene. Thanks for watching, David. Thanks for coming on tonight.
Bye bye.
Tune in next week, 7 p.m. Wednesday.